We've all been told to never go into the woods alone, especially not at night. We've been told twisted tales of what's happened to those who did not heed this warning, and whether or not they're true or fictional may never be determined. But the fear they incite is very, very real. All alone with nowhere to go, the only thing to keep you company is the sound of your own footsteps. At least you think they're yours. You question your sanity as the trees seem to envelop you like walls slowly closing in. Voices creep in to blend with the crunching of leaves below your feet, growing louder and louder with each passing moment. Closer and closer. Can you hear it? The forest is watching. They know where you are, and they know where you're going. Do you?
If walls could talk, they would tell us about what we don't see behind closed doors. One of my favorite quotes I tell myself. The fear of the unknown is the most intense one, but also the most exploitable. The idea that we don't know where we always are or what's out there can be frightening to many, and exploitable to most. And nothing understands that more than the horror genre. And with Halloween finally approaching, what better time to talk about exactly that? I'll be honest, it was really difficult to choose exactly which game I wanted to cover for my favorite holiday. My first thought was picking Outlast, a massive favorite of mine. Then, I thought of potentially covering a game called Visage, as I thought it to be scarier in some cases. Over time, however, I was growing more and more indecisive, as, let's be honest, there's so many good ones. Until one day, thanks to Xbox Live Gold's dying breath, one special game caught my eye, and I chose that instead. Enter Darkwood. When I picked this up, I thought to myself, hey, isn't that the game Bricky talked about, saying it's a horror game with absolutely no jump scares in its runtime? With that thought in mind, I said to myself, I'll be the judge of that. And I decided to check it out on my own. So in true Halloween fashion, I turned all the lights off, turned on the TV, and booted it up. What followed afterwards can only be described as pure terror and has officially dethroned Outlast. Darkwood is one of, if not, the best horror game I have ever played and deserves more attention than it gets. The best way I can describe this game is that it leaves you feeling akin to a rubber band. You are being stretched out to your absolute limit until eventually, at one point, something finally snaps. You're then left with that feeling of vulnerability. But enough chatter. You want to know why, so why delay the inevitable? The forest calls for us, you see. Best not to keep waiting. However, take heed, as you will not be led by the hand, 'cause I sure wasn't. Without further ado, turn the lights off, the volume up, and close your doors, as this is my love letter to Darkwood. Gather around, everyone. Allow me to tell you a story. But be warned, this story is not for the faint of heart. We begin with a tale about a plague spreading inside a forest that continues to grow, cutting everyone off from the outside world. You wake up on a desk in your house. You're a doctor, as evidenced by the cages and medical supplies strung about your house. He is here in hopes of helping find a way to stop the plague. After you gather the equipment you need and venture outside, we see the state of the forest as it closes in on your house and the environment around you. As you venture through, you see that someone else is still alive, but he only has a key and a journal. He might have a way to escape this forest, you think to yourself. However, he won't help voluntarily. After you interrogate the person, he leaves you in the room as you then take control of the stranger in question as you try to escape the doctor's house. That's when things get strange. After that bizarre encounter, you get taken by an unknown individual as he takes you to safety. You then reach your first hideout, and the journey officially begins. Your main objective? Get your key back from the doctor and escape this forest. Simple task, yes? But completing it? That's easier said than done. Darkwood's gameplay works so well in tandem with its horror elements and what it's going for that it's almost impossible to discuss without talking about both aspects at the same time. So that's what I attempt to do here. At first glance, it doesn't look like anything to cry home about. It's a top-down survival horror game with a huge emphasis on the survival part. However, as the stranger, you don't need to eat, drink, or sleep in order to survive. However, the true survival comes from grabbing everything you possibly can to help survive nightfall. In your hideout, you have an oven. This oven lets out special fumes that helps keep anything that has dangerous intentions out, and allows you to cook mushrooms, meat, and other organic materials into an essence that you inject into your veins to give you special abilities and upgrade your character. However, in this hideout, you also have a couple windows, a bench, a sawmill, and your generator. Your daily routine? Board up the windows, fuel your generator up to help keep the lights on, and scavenge weapons, items, traps, etc., which will help you to survive whatever comes your way at night. Once it reaches nightfall, you stay in your hideout until morning comes, and you rinse and repeat. Once you reach morning, you are met by the warm embrace of the traitor. This man is your one and true hope to help escape this forest. Every time you survive the night, you gain reputation with the traitor that allows you to buy his goods. And when I say it's imperative to get these resources from the traitor, I mean it. These consist of basic items, crafting items, weapon parts, consumables, and most importantly, a watch. This watch alone will save your life on countless occasions as it helps keep track of the day and night cycles, which is why I always recommend grabbing that as soon as you possibly can. Because that's when you realize that, outside of the traitor, your only true friend in this game is time. How much time you have to be able to walk around this forest and collect whatever you need to help you on your quest to escape. As you walk around outside your hideout, It's always important to be very wary of your surroundings, because while there is plenty to find that will be a benefit to you, there is also great danger lurking in the shadows. Exploration and discovery is one of Darkwood's greatest strengths. During daytime, you are given enough time to make your rounds exploring this forest and collecting anything that can be useful to help you get out that can be found in abandoned houses, landmarks, or simple dead bodies strung about. You then can take all of it back to your hideout and use it to your advantage, such as crafting lanterns, medical supplies, weapons, guns, etc. You will also meet other characters as you progress through the story, such as a man with a wolf's head, who tests your mettle by asking you to meet him in one of his camps in another part of the map. This is where exploration and being aware of your surroundings matters. Darkwood's first chapter contains 3 separate locations: the dry meadow, the silent forest, and the old woods, in that order. The map has 2 great aspects to it too. First off, for each new playthrough, the map completely changes randomly. This is smart because then you don't need to skip out on any exploration in the game. And the second aspect is that not only are important areas marked on the map when you arrive at them, but also you don't truly know where you are unless if you reach one of these landmarks, and when you reach one of these locations, a red hue on said location can be seen. So you basically use a map like a normal person would to navigate this forest. Each area contains different landmarks and areas that have their own individual stories to them. Some of these places though are just simple houses that have loot and enemies you need to kill, but others have story significance, which we'll get to later. My personal favorite is the village, but we'll talk about those locations more here soon. I mentioned all of this so early on because I've been delaying the best part of the game, when it hits nightfall. Once it reaches nightfall, the true horror commences.
We better get back, because it'll be dark soon, and they mostly come at night. Mostly.
Nightfall in Darkwood is where I began to realize just how effective the game's atmosphere is, and how it also will help you realize how important it is to be prepared, because each time you die during the night, you don't gain any reputation with the traitor, and you will desperately need it. But in reality, that's the least of your worries. One thing I didn't mention yet, but I will mention here, is that your character has a cone-like field of view. This field of view does not limit the environment around you, of course, as trees, houses, landmarks, etc. can be seen no matter what. You know that your hideout's still going to be there when you turn around. On the other hand, animals, people, and creatures do not go by this rule, which means that if you want to run away from what's coming for you, you have to turn your back on it and lose sight of it. This is already super effective because it makes you question whether it's catching up to you or if it's lost interest in you. The field of view does not limit sound though, which is Darkwood's greatest strength, its sound design. Fear is not what's created with our eyes, but with our ears. Noises that you don't know where they're coming from or who's doing it is what will set you on edge, coupled with the music that's consistently rising as it all goes on, and you have a terrifying experience. The idea that you know that something is out there, you think you can hear some sort of noise, but you won't know for sure unless you went out there and saw it for yourself. I mention all this because it all culminates when it starts to get dark, and these moments are what can only be described as pure terror. Nighttime usually takes up to 5 minutes, but those 5 minutes will feel like hours as panic begins to set in. The idea of being completely alone with nowhere to go, as you're completely trapped in one place, and the game plays with your primal fear of the unknown like a puppet. Anything can happen during nighttime, from dogs or savages coming into your house on the first hideout, to horrifying abominations bursting in and coming for you. What makes these moments even more terrifying are the moments where random events begin to occur. From bugs coming in infesting your hideout, to ethereal lights shining outside, or even something as simple as a simple knock on the door when no one is around. With all this, while you have to deal with a limited amount of resources, those few minutes will take its toll on you. And it's important to be prepared, as with each new section, the difficulty increases as new monsters and events continue to arrive at your doorstep when you least expect it. The swamp in Chapter 2 specifically is where the difficulty skyrockets, as monsters are far more frequent there. Though they do compensate for this by giving you better loot in the map, but regardless, the fear is all the same and the dread remains. This is honestly when the game made me feel the most vulnerable I've ever felt in a horror game. I can't even count the amount of times where the game has stressed me out and had me feeling like I was fearing for my life, knowing that something was out there and was going to come inside and find me. All this leads to moments like this. That sigh of relief you feel washes your fears away until you do it all again, when it starts to get dark.
Jesus, what?
Run! Run! Run away!
My heart! Oh, it came up and breathed in my ears!
And I haven't even talked about the dream sequences yet either. These sequences occur almost every time you level up your oven, and in their own right, they are very creepy segments. Darkwood is a masterful achievement of survival horror. Its tension is forever present, and it's effective at doing just that while adding a satisfying loop that keeps you wanting to play it again for a worthwhile experience in which it will never be forgotten. The last thing I want to talk about in this is Darkwood's story, as it's the legitimate cherry on top of this already fantastic game. The best way I can describe the story is that it boils down to 3 simple words. Ignorance is bliss, and I will explain why later on in this segment. Like mentioned before, your main objective for this story is to find the doctor who stole your key and get out. The good news is that you know where the underground passage is, but he does not. Characters that you will meet in this forest make for the bulk of Darkwood's story, and surprisingly, no character has an actual real name. You are considered the stranger in this game. Your face is horribly disfigured, you're wearing the clothes of a scarecrow, and you're also a mute, so you're unable to truly speak to the locals. In this forest, there's of course also the Wolfman, the Traitor, the Chicken Lady, the 3, the Doctor, the Elephants, the Mushroom Granny, and of course the Snail. Dear God, the Snail. There's more characters that you'll come across, but they all have their unique backstories and they all have their interesting quest lines that you can complete, and you'll love to learn more about them. The story itself is pretty easy to follow, but the main bulk of it all is just learning more about those who inhabit this dark forest. Your choices affect whether or not certain characters will survive, and the alliances that you work with and help out. The Elephants and the Wolfman in particular have some really interesting questlines and stories that make them some of my favorites at how compelling they are, but the Doctor is probably my personal favorite character. Mostly because his story is one of descent into madness. When you first see him, he's trying his best to help stop the plague, or whatever's happening in this dark forest. For the next time you see him, however, he's locked himself in a wrecked train cart for Lord knows how long, and he's paranoid, covered in sweat, and further descends into mania over the course of Chapter 2, as he soon realizes that any hope of helping anyone in this forest are all meaningless efforts. There's a lot of lore and intrigue here that it would be incredibly difficult to go into detail without making this almost a couple hours long. So my personal recommendation is to learn about them for yourself. The story gets a lot easier to understand once you reach Chapter 2, in which I will start to get into some spoilers, so if you want to go into this blind, I'll leave a timestamp here as a bit of a warning before we get to the ending. Alright, we good? Good. So, once you find the doctor, you tell him about the underground passage that can help get both of them out of this forest. Once you reach the underground passage and open the door, you then get to Chapter 2. Chapter 2 is the swamp that I mentioned earlier in this video, and the plot gets a lot easier to follow from here on out. You have a massive tree that is filled with the souls of the inhabitants of this forest that's blocking your way from escaping this forest, and that you'll need to burn it down, but you can't do so unless you go underground and get to its roots. However, there's two small problems. One, there's a water tunnel blocking your way, so you'll need an oxygen tank for it. And two, the compressor is broken, and it's the only way to fill up your oxygen tanks. So your mission? Repair the compressor, fill up your oxygen tanks, and then make your way to the tree. After a very trippy dream sequence, you make it underneath the tree that has a massive gas tank that can help burn the tree down. You then break open the valve, spilling the gasoline everywhere, set the whole thing ablaze, hightail the hell out of there, and once you burn down the tree, you get the ending, which is something I will be spoiling in its entirety. So I recommend, if you want to go in completely blind, this is your true checkpoint to leave, then come back. I'll be posting the timestamp again to avoid spoilers for you all, but if you trust me, I recommend you leave now and go check the game out for yourself. But for others, you're welcome to stay. Alright, are they gone? Good. Here we go. Once you burn down the tree, you have to survive one last night before escaping, as it takes a whole night cycle to burn the tree down. This night, however, is unlike all of the other nights. When night begins, your radio goes off asking, "Why did you do it?" before setting ablaze in a giant ball of flame. After that, a swarm of the undead souls that were part of the tree start coming for you, one by one, till they eventually swarm you. I got unlucky in this part of the game and died, but when morning came, I made it straight for the burned down tree and you enter the road home. After a long segment down the road home, you finally clear the forest and head back to what looks like civilization. You walk around town, talk to some of your locals you cross by, go to your apartment and get all nice and changed up, make some soup, and after so many days of hell, you finally return to your nice warm bed and drift peacefully to sleep. And they all lived happily ever after. But wait a minute, so much of this feels wrong. First off, you're horribly disfigured, so anyone that comes across you would probably be scared of you or want to take you to the hospital. And your character is a mute, but yet is able to talk to the locals? However, the underlying issues start to become more apparent when you reach your apartment building. Did you go down into the basement and spot a radio after changing the frequency so many times? Does it tell you to go to sleep? Did you notice that somebody left their baby on the floor? Have you noticed something coming out of this small little crack here? Has the hallway felt like it's a constant loop and roots begin to grow? If you answered yes to at least 2 or 3 of these questions, roots will begin to show up in your apartment, and you begin to see something that is most definitely wrong. After you take the flooring out of your house, you look directly under your bed to see a giant hole in the ground. You go inside and then wake up and look around to see that you're surrounded by thousands of souls much like you who have drifted into a deep sleep, and at the center of it all is the being. This eldritch monster has been feeding off of you and many others through your dreams as it helps you feel all nice and warm on the inside, and it eats away at your very soul without you knowing. Like I said, ignorance is bliss. You talk to the being as it tries to lull you back to sleep, tell the being to piss off, and then find one of your old partners carrying a flamethrower while he sleeps. You take the flamethrower off his hands and use it to destroy and kill everyone, burning it all down. You kill the being, sacrifice yourself in the process, and the true ending is yours. In this fairy tale, there is no happy ending. Only the charred remains of the forest that has put you through hell, and the ashes of the miserable souls that were trapped in the being's grasp, yourself included. What was the being? We don't know. That's not what matters. What truly matters is that you discovered the truth and you finally destroyed it. You accomplished what the doctor couldn't and found a way to stop whatever was plaguing this forest, but at the cost of your own life. It's a depressing and grim ending to a depressing and grim story, and I loved it. Though it does make you question, was that forest all real then? Or was it a figment of your imagination? Well, one thing for sure is that whatever happened, those who survived are at peace, and the nightmares are all behind them now, and you can finally rest. And that is Darkwood. This game needs as much attention as it can possibly get. I know it's an older game than others, but I have to give love and respect to games that respect the genre that it's a part of. This game is a masterpiece in survival horror and has now taken a spot in my top 10 games. Not in a long time have I come across a horror game that has such passion, respect, heart, soul, and love for the horror genre quite as much as this one. From its gameplay, the atmosphere, the story, all of this culminates into a masterful experience from start to finish. I also want to give a massive shout out to Horror and Hellfire for doing some of the voice work at the beginning of the video. I figured a Halloween special wouldn't be complete without the queen of horror herself. Show her some love and support for me. She absolutely deserves it, and I can't thank her enough. And no better game could I have chosen for her to take in a part of like this one. I recommend Darkwood wholeheartedly, even to those who really don't like horror games. You don't even need to play it all the way through. You just need to experience it. That hands-on experience alone is more than enough to show what this game has to offer. After all, the forest beckons for us all. I'll be watching this studio more closely from this point on to see what else they can come up with, because they definitely do now have my full, undivided attention. And that is my love letter to Darkwood. Oh, and if you're watching this at night, sweet dreams.